Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Willard Preacher Podcast. I'm Matt, and I am once again joined by Gary Cattell, who is known as the Willard Preacher. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. So I understand that you've been on campus each weekday. It's been about, I don't know, 9 or 10 days since we last chatted. So how have things been going out there?
They've been going pretty normal. I mean, on the one hand, we're not getting huge crowds out there to listen to what we have to say, but people are stopping by fairly regularly to ask questions. I don't know, how much they understand or whatever, but they ask questions and then move on. And we have some regulars that are coming back. But the other day, what day was that? Maybe Wednesday? Yesterday? No, last Tuesday. There was the fire alarm went off in Willard. So all these students came out and, just wanting to be preached to, I guess.
I guess so.
So stood up and started talking to them about being indoctrinated and, all that sort of stuff, brainwashed. And then I brought up transgenderism. And by the way, if you're a parent, you might want to pause, get the kids out just for a second. It's not going to be much, but just, I don't know what you want your kids to hear or not hear. But so I started talking about transgenderism, and this guy up on the steps starts booing me. So I started saying, looking at the students, and I said, well, this is what I mean about education. You bring something up, and I was talking about how, as we talked on our transgender podcast, I guess I was talking about how physical reality is always right and never wrong. Mm-hmm. Thoughts and feelings are oftentimes wrong or can be wrong. So when the two conflict, physical reality is always where the truth lies. And so the physical reality of your body, gender is just thoughts and feelings. It's not a thing like the body is. Mm-hmm. So if your sex is male and your thoughts and feelings say you're female, physical reality can't be wrong. Thoughts and feelings can be wrong. Mm-hmm. So you're male and not female. And so the guy started booing and whatever. And I said, this is what the education system has done. You put forth ideas and what do you get from the educated college student? Just someone who boos. Mm-hmm. Now over on my left, there was a guy who was in a suit and tie. I don't know if he was the professor or not. I think he may have been. And he says, so how do you know you're a man? Now, in my day, those are fighting words, right? How do you know you're a man? So, but, nonetheless, I'm like, well, I have a penis and I've got, the right muscle mass and bone structure. And he says, we have your chromosomes tested yet? Now, admittedly, I wasn't the most patient person in the world. And I was getting a little frustrated with the questioning. And if I wasn't, I probably would have challenged him to probably would have said something like, hey, we can both get our chromosomes tested. I'll bet you $500 they're both, the sex that we're made of. Uh-huh. But I just, I forget what I said exactly. That I didn't really need a chromosome test or, how to get a chromosome test. He said, well, chromosomes can be skewed. They can be messed up, and that's true. In a very, very small amount of cases, they can be, but I don't think it really affects your XY, whether your actual sex or not. I think they can still figure that out. But even if they couldn't, it would be such a small minority. So, I could have challenged him to, all right, we'll get every transgender person at Penn State, mm-hmm. and you give me $500 for every time that the sex they were born with doesn't match up to their chromosomes. Mm-hmm. You give me $500 every time the sex they're born with matches up with their chromosomes. Right. And if I wasn't so frustrated with him and impatient at the question, probably would have said that. So we went back and forth like that. And then another guy over on my right, a student, says, well, he was replying to what I said about physical reality. And he said, well, what if somebody's having an illusion or delusion? I said, well, that's not a problem of the physical world. That's a problem of the mind. The physical mm-hmm. world is still what it is. He's just not perceiving it right. So it stands that physical reality is never wrong. It's the mind that's wrong. It's the thinking that's wrong.
Right. That's what
And
makes
then,
it a delusion.
yeah,
Right.
right. And that's, and again, that should have been self-evident to a college student. But, what's happening, and then, the bells stopped ringing, they went in or whatever. But I was thinking today, I've been rereading, what's the name of that book? I have it here. Live Not by Lies by Rod Dreher. And he was talking about how, we're kind of controlled by bread and circuses, essentially, right? Being entertained all the time, full stomach all the time. And I'm starting to realize that that's, probably the main reason why students don't have time to look into any of this, because they've got their entertainment in their hand. They got the phone in their hand, they can be entertained anytime they want. And it reminded me of Brave New World. In Brave New World, if you started to get a little antsy, you start to think things might not be quite right, what are we doing here? Then you take Soma. It's just a pill, and then everything's okay again. Well, the same thing is happening, I think, with students. Number one, they're always being entertained, so they don't have time to think about anything. They're always taking in that information. You don't have time to process it or think about it. But if any time something seems like it's not quite right, what do? They get on the phone or whatever it is, whatever device they have. They go through, videos and memes and whatever, just mindless stuff. And eventually whatever problem they had with society, an uneasy feeling just kind of goes away. So keeping us entertained all the time, ease and comfort, all that sort of fun enjoyments. When we have that all the time, why do we want to go through the hassle of challenging society, trying to find the truth, trying to find God? We'll make sacrifices. They'll make sacrifices, in their studies. They'll make sacrifices eventually in work in order to get the ease and comfort, in order to get the entertainments. But you talk about seeking after God, or you talk about, seeking for truth. It's not going to bring you entertainment. It's not going to bring you comfort. It's going to be difficult. You're going to go through a certain amount of hard times and sufferings trying to find God, and you're not quite ready yet, and and you don't know what's going on, and you have to persevere. But you're getting God in the end, but you're not getting, the ease and comfort doesn't come along with it. And I think that I don't know if this is a grand conspiracy or anything, but the way it's worked out, maybe it's a conspiracy on the part of the demons, but the way it's worked out is we're so addicted now to the ease and comfort and entertainments and fun and so on, that there's no reason to sacrifice to try to find the truth. So even when they hear and they realize, oh, I don't know that I can't know who God is, or I don't know that I can't know the truth, or when they tell me that's the truth, they tell me I can't know the truth, is that a truth statement? That kind of, blows itself up. There's no reason for them to do that, because they can, that's difficult, and they don't need the difficulty. They can just go back and have some entertainment and some fun at their fingertips. So I think we've been given bread and circuses, whether it was, on purpose or not, it doesn't matter. But we've been given it to be controlled. Right? Now they can tell us anything. They can drive us off the cliff and we won't even notice it, because we're too busy being entertained and having fun and enjoying ourselves.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with any of that in and of itself, but it's just become too much. Right? We've become addicted to it, and we care about it more than we care about the truth. And I was thinking about that movie. What was that Protestant movie with the hippies? Jesus Revolution.
Jesus Revolution. Yep.
Right. So what did they do to keep the hippies? They gave them worship, which was entertaining. They essentially took the rock music, maybe a softer form of it than some of them were listening to, and brought it into the church. So here you can be entertained here in church. And that's a lot of Protestant worship, entertainment, keep people. And then the pastor has to be entertaining too. He has to get up there and he has to have this great sermon and all these visual effects or whatever. It has to be a charismatic person just to keep people.
Yeah.
Because we just want to be entertained. And of course, in Orthodoxy, it's not about being entertained. It's about becoming godlike, and the worship is there to become godlike, and the preaching hopefully is there to become godlike, and everything's to be godlike. It's not there to be entertaining. And so I would imagine a certain amount of people coming to the Orthodox Church are going to say, well, that's not for me because, hey, it's not fun. You didn't have fun. You know, it can be holy, it can be good, you can be worshiping with the angels, you can make progress in becoming godlike, but if it's not fun, if it's not enjoyable, if it's not entertaining, well, you know, I don't want it. I want soma, you know, I want the drug. I want to be entertained.
Yeah. There's a lot that's going on in my mind about what you were saying there, you know, because on one hand, yeah, we are controlled by kind of maybe even just the anxiety that we might not have such comfort, you know, that we might lose any little bit of that comfort. And we are certainly controlled by that. If we think about in the pandemic, we were told to stay home, but then we were given checks so that we would sort of, you know, stay kind of settled in that, you know. So we're following along with that, and we're receiving,
and the pot
what
shops
we're
are
receiving.
open,
Right. Yeah.
and the alcohol shops are open.
So yeah, and I guess especially for the young people, like you're describing, I do think that for you know, at least the experience in our parish here, the unsettling nature of the COVID experience and what was kind of put upon us and so on, I think it ultimately was a good thing, because it did cause people to lose faith in those who are who are telling them what to do and how to be safe and all that kind of stuff. I think it kind of lifted, for some people anyway, it lifted the blinders a little bit. And like you're saying, I think that also, you know, we have actually several friends who, you know, they still have not really gone back to church after the pandemic, who are Protestant predominantly, and they, you know, they've kind of gotten used to, well, we do church in our pajamas and it's a real relaxed thing, and we catch a sermon, and there's no real sense of asceticism or holy mystery either. You know, there's no reason to go per se. And so some folks, yeah, they are content to do that. I do think other people, though, that it really opened their eyes to how shallow all that is. And so I don't know, I guess we've had, I guess, quite a few catechumens in that time. It's probably slowed down a bit more recently, but nevertheless, I do think people have responded to the fact that, okay, this, you know, it does require something of you, or Holy Orthodoxy does require something of you. It is profound, it is beautiful, it is otherworldly. It's sort of a lot of the answers to all the things that we're describing here. But yeah, it would be real easy to see someone with maybe who's not maybe real mature, who sort of, you know, comes into Orthodoxy, is very excited initially, and then it kind of gets, you know, like most things, the spiritual life, God allows it to become a bit more difficult so that we will put our effort into moving forward in it freely. And yeah, if someone's not settled in that, especially if someone's kind of, I don't know, the word that I want to bring to mind is just immature, thinking that, oh, but you know, wouldn't this be more, I'm looking for something more interesting, or something that's more about me, or something along those lines. Yeah, well, I guess time will tell if the people who have come into Orthodoxy in those last few years, or if that is hopefully it's something that they stick with, but it's not because of the things that our society has prepared them for. You know, it's their own perseverance in the face of all that.
Yeah, and I think to some degree we're all infected by this. You know, we all have it pretty easy. We look back on history. and none of us are really, or few of us are really used to struggling. And even those who try, it's still not maybe what it could be. We could all struggle more,
Mm-hmm.
but it's difficult when you have it so easy, and especially if you've grown up with these entertainments. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
when I was young, you had TV, you had maybe 4 or 5 channels, and parents would always send you outside, go do something. Wasn't anything to watch anyhow. But there was still, this thing of it's not good for kids just to be sitting in front of the TV all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they really couldn't do that most of the year because the TV was in the house,
Yeah.
right? And so you had to be somewhere where a television was. Now you take the entertainment with you everywhere you go. And at least at Penn State, and I assume most college campuses, and I assume most people, at least under 30, it's
Mm-hmm.
just their constant companion.
Yeah.
It's what they know, it's who they are. And again, that entertainment just gets to be addicting. We're not addicted to, most of us, pot or Coke or something. We're
Mm-hmm.
addicted to the entertainment. We're addicted to the devices.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just can't do without them. And it's not just young people. I see people, my age and your age and so on, and walking down the street with either something plugged into their ears or a phone in front of their face or whatever. And again, it's important that we don't have time to think about anything, because we're
Right.
always taking in information, and we get addicted to taking in information. It's just like a drug, and you can't. So even if some information comes into your head that says something's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of vague, but something's wrong, not that long ago you would have had time to sit down and think about it, or
Mm-hmm.
walk around and think about it. You had plenty of time because there wasn't that much to do.
Right.
But now there's so much more. So as soon as you get more information in, that information that was trying to say to you something's wrong it's gone, because you got
Mm-hmm.
new stuff in there. And of course, now you don't remember it. Now you're not agitated anymore. Now everything's good again.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a lot, probably we make a big deal about 1984, and that is still relevant. But I really think, for at least in the West, our probably Brave New World is more relevant to our situation.
Yeah.
Because that's how they kept everybody sedate. They gave them the drug. Well, we have the drug, and we're kept sedate.
Yeah. There was a commenter in the sort of public education sphere that I liked a lot, who's since departed, but his comment, he made many great observations about public school, especially, and but one of the great ones was that he said public school is there to extend adolescence. And that's something that you've mentioned many times, where they just call themselves kids, and they're 20 years old and they're kids still. And there's something very much like that easy entertainment to the developing mind, or to the adolescent mind, it's like trying to convince your 8-year-old, if he had unlimited candy in front of him, it's like, don't eat this candy, it's just sitting there, but don't eat it. I know you like it, but don't eat it. It's like, it's such a ready temptation. There's nonstop entertainment, games, and things to distract them. And yeah, and even if they do feel this sort of sense of uneasiness that you're describing, you sort of need to sit with that for a minute, like you said. And there's so much other information that just sort of washes that. What was that thing I was thinking about? What was I even worried about? I can't even remember. It's really helpful to have. I mean, we've talked on here before, my experience encountering you when I was 18, and I didn't have a TV in my dorm room, and I had no phone. And what a helpful thing that was, because I could just walk. I'd be walking around. People who did have music, they had a little disc man, so they had a little device that was spinning a CD, or that's pretty inconvenient. So yeah, I was fortunate to, everywhere I would walk about town or on campus or whatever, I had my thoughts, and be weighing things or whatever. And thank God, you know, hanging out at Willard was so helpful to me because I had so much stuff to unlearn and unpack and weigh, and you know, and at a certain point, to start seeking, you know, as if I could, I would say if I can boil down your message over the years, I would say that, you know, it's that God is there, God is knowable, and if you seek him, he will reveal himself to you.
Right.
You know, that was new information to me. I was, you know, so I had to think about, is that possible? Does God do that? I always assumed that he didn't, but I guess it's possible. Sure, it stands to reason that it's possible. And then you start seeking, and you know, I think the period of time for me to really be intensely seeking was probably a little bit more than a year. And you know, it's probably a bit longer for you, I suppose. But in the midst of that, there's sometimes when it's like, it's very lonely, it's very inspiring, or you're angry at God that you don't know exists, or all those sorts of things. But you have to be able to sit with all that in order to continue to press on. And thank God I was blessed to have that experience without having it all washed away with yet another clip from YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be growing up. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day along these lines, and I've talked to people about this before, and they say a lot of times, you know, you don't know hardly anybody on your dorm floor, and that was inconceivable when I was in college because you didn't have anything to do. You could sit in your room and play records on a stereo, but you know, that gets, you know, only you can do that so many times. You had to get, it's not that you had to get out. It's just that that's what you did. You got out, you met people, you talked with people, you did things with other people. Now you can just kind of isolate yourself, just you and your mind, and that's all you got. So yeah, and the kids thing. What do kids do? They learn from the adults. So you know, I've been trying to tell them that, look, when you get to be, you know, college age, you get to be a young adult, right? It's your job to look at the ideas, the morals, the beliefs of the culture and see if they hold water or not. Each new generation coming up should do that because they've got a fresh perspective, and they should challenge everything, and they should say, is this right? And they should be debating the older generation and seeing, well, what's right and what's wrong, and changing those things that aren't right. But when you see yourself as kids just learn from the adults. I've heard, I don't know how many people say, well, I'm just a kid. I don't know anything. You know, these 18 to 22-year-olds, I don't know anything. I'm just here to learn from those who do know something. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, that's humble, and that's you know, maybe there's something to that. But in this context, I'm not going to challenge anything. I'm not going to ask questions. I don't know anything. I'm just going to go along. I'm just going to be, you know, like I may have said last time, you know, the motto is, I'm going to be a nice person and follow the rules, you know, and what sort of life is that?
Yeah.
But that's what they're relegated to, because without God, without the hope of finding the truth, what else are you going to do? And so you just end up, like you said, extending your adolescence all the way through college.
Yeah. And beyond.
And by that time, if you weren't totally brainwashed before, you're going to be now, because now you've had 16 years of not challenging anything and just accepting everything. And everybody around you is the same way. You know, so, you know, you're kind of doomed to just carry on every bad idea that the society has, not even knowing it's a bad idea, nor really caring, because again, you've got all these entertainments and all this fun you can have. So why risk being called a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, a transphobe, a hater, a science denier, or whatever? You don't have to risk all that. You just kind of go along. Everything will be okay. And you'll have your comforts and your ease and your stuff, and you'll have a good life if that's what they think a good life is, which they obviously do.
Yeah.
But it's a nothing life. You will not have done anything in life. You would have wasted your life.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have found truth yourself. You wouldn't have been able to help anybody else find the truth. and you've allowed your society to essentially go off the cliff.
Right. Yeah, and I think that the idea that a college student would come there and just say, well, I don't know anything, I'm just here to learn from the experts. I mean, that is straight from our culture, though. We're led by the experts that we're supposed to trust.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we can't question something that is obviously harmful to us, let's say in medicine. And what will somebody say? Like, well, I'm no doctor, I'm no medical researcher. It's like, okay, but you don't need to be in order to at least question something simple about that thing. And
Right.
so there is something about, I mean, think about it. You go to public school and the teacher is supposedly the expert in that subject. There's a training about how we defer to experts, through the years, and then they go to college, and then those professors are the experts. And boy, is that a dangerous way to look at the world.
Yeah, I would think that that's kind of normal, at least until high school. In high school, you should be starting to question things, at least, eighth, ninth grade, 10th grade, whatever. You should be starting to question things. And certainly by college, there's no excuse in college to say, I'm just here to learn. Yes, you're here to learn. And if you're going into engineering or this or that, of course. But when you're talking about the different morals of society, the beliefs of society, the ideas of society that drive us, the ideas about God, whether we can know him or not, and so on, the transgender, the homosexual, the abortion, I mean, they come here and they just go out on the weekends and get drunk and laid because that's what college students do.
Mm-hmm.
Not every single one of them is there every weekend, but most of them are there at some point. And the ones that aren't, few of them say it's wrong because it's just, well, that's what you do. You're a college student. You do that. There's no questioning. There's no, and those that do, as we've said before, are so afraid of being, called out on social media and not being able to get the job or not being able to get the grade or whatever, or lose the job if you have a job, that they're not willing to put themselves out there. And so it's just doomed to continue until we decide, people start to decide, look, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to say no more. Yeah. Or there comes a generation that says, look, we're not just going to go along with this. We're going to challenge it. We're going to think for ourselves. We're going to try to find the truth. And not just thinking for yourself in that I'm just going to make something up that's different, but truth. Find truth.
Yeah, see, and again, whatever it may be. Yep.
Yeah, and wherever it leads you, wherever you end up, and always be seeking truth your entire life. And again, as we've said before, that all comes back. Ultimate truth always comes back to whether there's a God or not, right? Because if there is a God, he's the truth. He's the reason why we exist. If there's no God, there is no reason why we exist. And we're just going to die and cease to exist. We're an accident that one day will cease. The whole world, the whole universe will go dark one day, and it was all meaningless. One of those two things is true. You can't do this through the negative. You can't know that there is no God, so you can only do it through the positive. There's many things you can do, but in the midst of all those things, watching debates, talking to people, reading things, you should be asking God, enlighten me. And if you have to be seeking after truth. If you're not seeking after truth, there's other spirits out there that can deceive you. But if you're seeking after truth, God will ultimately respond. And if you're seeking after truth and you do happen to get off for a while, truth lies aren't that good. If you're always seeking after truth, you'll spot them as a lie. But if you're content with just, I had a spiritual experience and that's all it takes. I know a lot of people who over the years who have said, oh yeah, I had some experience and I found that God exists and I'm satisfied with that. Well, then you're not really a seeker after truth, because you shouldn't be satisfied with that. Who is the God? What does he want from you? How should you live your life? What's the purpose of life? These are all the great questions of the ages that people who came into college used to ask and want answers for and find answers for. Yeah, now they mock the questions.
It was that struggle for that knowledge that was the entire basis for the liberal education, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you ask the questions, and the questions again are like, Is there a God or not? If so, who is he? What's he want from us? How should we live our life? What are the right morals? Why is there something rather than nothing? What happens after death? And how can we prepare? All these sorts of questions that again, people used to want to know the answers to, college students. Now they just mock the questions because they think, there's no way you can know that. Why even bother? Why even, who cares?
Yeah.
And
the fact that they assert that nobody knows and furthermore that they can't know is just brainwashing.
It's a crime.
It is.
Yeah, it's a crime. They've been, their education, between the education and the media. And I was talking to a friend today, and he reminded me of something, because he was talking to I think a college student who was on Facebook. Not college students aren't on Facebook as much, they're on other things, but she kept telling him, I'm addicted to it. I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. Right. And I remember someone telling me a number of years ago, he said, yeah, it's called FOMO, fear of missing out. Right. You're always afraid that you're going to miss out on something. Something's going to happen and you're not going to be there, and everyone's going to be telling you about it and you didn't know it. And so all of these pressures, and it's very, very difficult to get out of that. But you have to, if you want to find truth, if you want your life to mean something, if you don't want to just have on your grave, I was a nice person who followed the rules.
Right.
Yeah. It's not life.
No.
and you can follow the rules into hell.
That's right.
Or into any sort of horrible thing in this life, because nations get off. Nations go in the wrong directions. And if you're in Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia or whatever, and you're just being a good person and following the rules, you're going to end up being partially responsible for what your country has done in the world. And we're going down that road. We've been going down that road since at least minimum the 60s.
There's this that educational commenter, his name was John Gatto, and he pointed out this during Nazi Germany. I think there was this little town, I think it was probably France, and the story goes that the Nazi soldiers came into town and they went to the teachers and said, okay, you need to get all your kids together and get them orderly and so on. So the teacher's like, come on, listen to them. And there was one kid that just wouldn't obey, and he just took off. He was the only one in the entire town that survived, because the teachers were there to round them up, and then of course everyone was killed. So that's really where that sort of blind obedience leads, if we're not careful.
Yeah, and history doesn't reward, or people don't reward, the ones that are just blindly obedient. I mean, even if your culture is right, you still need to find that out. You still need to know that. You still need to confirm that. And if it's not, then you need to stand against that. And those are the people that get honored, not the people that just blindly follow. Even if your culture is right, if you just blindly follow, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, there's no virtue in that.
Yeah. So real quick here before we move on, just wanted to hawk this book. It's not mine, obviously, but "Live Not by Lies" by Rod Dreher. Very good book. He goes through a lot of these things that we've been talking about and gives the genesis of them. And basically what it was is he started talking to somebody, suggested he talk to this, I think it was a lady who had lived through communism and who was saying, America's going down the same road. And he was like, but he finally did. And it was so enlightening to him that he then went and talked to others and got all this information together about how, and this was a couple of years ago now, not that long ago, that we're, as Americans, these people are saying, I came here to get away from that, and now we're going down the same road. And because we're just submitting ourselves blindly and moving down the road. And a few are speaking out, I guess, but it's not enough to change anything at this point.